we do have a quorum, so it's 7:01. So I think we'll start. I'll call the meeting to order. We have the minutes of November 17, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
I'd move to approve the minutes of November 17, 2020 with any amendments thereto.
Second.
We have a second. Page 1. Page 2.
Excuse me.
Just a couple of corrections on item number 6. Lamplight in both the heading and in the motion actually are spelled wrong. They should be LAMPLITE.
Yeah.
And the other one was a question, I'm not sure, maybe Joy knows, and or the Holland Lane, Pam Cowan spoke. I thought I saw that she was the homeowner association president. If that's not right, then resident is fine.
I think you may be correct, Terry, but I'm not positive either.
I think I saw something on chat when she was wanted to speak. We'll just let it go as resident at this time. And page 3. Just one correction at the very bottom of the page where it talks about there was no action as a result of executive session, and Chairman McKeag should be an MAC instead of MCC. Oh, yeah. And it should read the Chairman McKeag adjourned the executive session and the meeting at 9:15.
Okay.
Hearing no other corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of November 17th, 2020, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very good. We have done it unanimously. Now moving on to public comment. Eric, is there anyone that indicates that they wish to make any public comment tonight?
Let's see. Nope, I don't see anyone at this point, Terry. I just have, someone's just asking who's going to be interviewed. And Greg, if you're listening, I see you on there. You're all set. Thanks.
Okay. So we do have interviews tonight for 3 for the Community Justice Center Board, and there are enough seats to accommodate all 3 if we wish to do that. And 1 for the Cemetery Commission, Joan Pentkowski, who I believe has served on the Cemetery Commission before. Is Joan on the line yet, Eric?
Yep, I see her, Terry.
I think we could do her first and then go with the 3 together for the CJC.
Sure. Hi, Joan. I'm going to connect you in just a moment, and you can share your video and unmute here. So just a moment, I'll get you connected. Once you get connected, you'll just need to unmute in the lower left-hand corner on Zoom, and you also will have an option to share your video if you would like at that point. I'm just working to get her connected here.
Yes.
Hi, Joan.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the Select Board, Joan. And we have your application for a member of the Cemetery Commission. And I'd like to have you just give us a little brief introduction of yourself and for the people who are watching this as well, and then why you'd like to be on the Cemetery Commission. I believe you were on the commission before.
Yes, I have been. It was some time ago. Well, first of all, I've lived in Williston for 33 years now in the same location on Walker Hill Road. I retired about 5 years ago from immigration. During that time working at immigration, I was a legal assistant, paralegal to the attorney group there. But during that time, my husband was sick, and that is the reason that I resigned from the cemetery commission at that time, because I was quite busy with working and with my husband not being well. Before I worked for immigration about 17 years, and before that I worked at IBM, and I retired from IBM as well. And before that, I worked at IBM. I worked on the line, and I also the work that we were doing was moved to another location, and so they asked what else could I do. So I started working for the patent attorney at IBM in Essex. Before that, I worked for Vermont District Court and State Police, which was the special unit of Marine Division, snowmobile, mountain rescue, so on. I was like dispatch for them. I've done many things since I've lived here in Williston and in Essex. We have 3 children who went to Essex schools and work in the area now. I've been in the Girl Scouts and helped with our church. So I like giving as much as I can if it's necessary and if it's needed. There's a lot of other little detailed duties that I've done since I've lived up in this area. I'm originally from the Rutland area and worked in the legal field in Rutland. I worked for Tuttle Law Print down there, which was, they made legal forms for attorneys at that time. And then I worked at the Rutland Herald. So I've had a lot of different jobs, and they've been jobs that I've stayed with, especially the jobs up here. And I enjoy people, and I enjoy all types of people. And I think I can work with all types of people. And what you see is what you get, basically, from me. It's if I don't know the answer, I'll find it. And I'll get back to whoever it is.
Good, thank you. So I'm sure the board may have some questions for you.
Sure.
Did you, when you were on the cemetery commission before, was that an elected position or was that an appointed position?
That was an appointed, as far as I was kind of like just an extra hand. Because I had a steady job as well, I wasn't as involved with the cemetery commission as I would have liked to have been. I never got involved with selling lots, although I bought 7 in the Deerview. But I'm anxious to learn more areas of the cemetery commission responsibilities now that I do have more time.
Good, thanks. So members of the board, questions for Joan? I don't.
Not quite, Joan. I just want to say thank you for your willingness to serve, and I'm sure you're going to make a great contribution. Your resume, I just wanted to say, reminds me of my father, who was a lawyer. That the criminal docket clerk, you would have been in federal court when Judge Coffrin was there. Is that right?
Judge Costello.
Judge Costello.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, so,
Yeah,
okay.
I was a criminal docket clerk.
Well, I just bought a used car from his son, Steve. If it goes wrong,
Wow. It's a small
you and I are going to
world
talk, and we're going to go visit him.
out.
So, and the other thing is the Tuttle Law Print. Those forms were used when I became a lawyer in 1991. My father was still practicing for the last couple of years of his practice,
Wow.
and he insisted on using those Tuttle Law forms. And I tried to introduce him to this incredible device called a computer.
Yes.
And he was very hesitant. He knew about the Tuttle Law forms, but the computer he didn't trust. So anyway,
Oh,
well,
wow.
thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
So if nobody has any questions, then a motion would be in order.
I'd move to appoint Joan Pentowski to the Cemetery Commission to an unexpired 5-year term through June 30th, 2025.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion then raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unanimous. Thank you very much, Joan. Congratulations. You are now officially appointed, and
I accept. Thank you very much.
well, thank you very much for your willingness to serve on this too. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Joan.
We'll move on then to the other appointments, interviews for the Community Justice Center. And we have Patrick Brown, Gregory Campbell, and Donna Stafford that are interested in serving. And Eric, hopefully they're all ready to be on the line with us.
Yep, they're all on, and I'm getting everyone connected right now. Just be a moment.
I see all three their pictures are on the screen. And so what we usually do is to interview all three of you at the same time. You come recommended by the CJC director and by the police. And we're very happy to have you as willing participants. So I'll ask each of you to introduce yourself a little bit, even though we have your application forms here. If you would introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of your background and why you'd like to be on the CJC board. And I'm looking at my screen. I'll start to my left and go with Donna first.
Thank you, Terry. My name is Donna Stafford. I live in Richmond, Vermont. I've been here for the last 10 years with my husband and a few animals, rabbit, chickens, and cats. And I'm a retired high school principal from New Hampshire, but I am originally a native Vermonter and actually came home to Vermont to retire. My husband and I kept some property that we had in Richmond, and after a number of years decided it was time to come back and spend our time and retirement here where we grew up. Giving back to our state actually was our goal. I work presently. I do lots of things. I'm a full-time doctoral student in my second year of my doctorate in educational leadership. I also work for the Vermont Agency of Education and have for the last 9 years. I got pretty bored after the renovations on the farmhouse were done and went back to work and have spent the last 9 years working with 300 plus schools in the state of Vermont as a school improvement coach. So that's sort of the last 10 years. Prior to that, We lived in New Hampshire, and I worked in a public high school. Was there in my last position for 15 years. And prior to that, worked in the private sector in business. I have a host of skill sets that I still enjoy using and would like to use in service to both of our communities, both Richmond and Williston. I think this year, the civic unrest, the systemic racism issues, the challenges that law enforcement has been met with in our communities and across the country made me aware that I might have skill sets that I could use to support the communities, to support law enforcement. It's one thing to donate money, which I've always been generous at doing, but it's another thing to give your time. And I want to support the folks that are entering the criminal justice system, the responsible parties, and hopefully be a positive role model. I've made mistakes in my life. I'm not going to deny that. And I've adversely impacted other individuals. But for the last 40 years, have spent my life working to be a positive change agent, to be a positive influence, and specialized in repairing relationships. You can imagine in a high school, there are lots of relationships to repair. So that's sort of who I am. And I'm sorry. That's me. And I would like to support Brenna and Krista Lee and the work that they're doing, because I think it's pretty amazing.
Thank you. Pat?
Yep. Hello. I visited you all a while back for the Forest Committee, I think, as well, and a couple of weeks ago concerning some other issues.
Yes.
I've lived in Vermont over 30 years. I was trying to figure out whether it's 32, 33, 34. So I've been here a long time. But I had a very time commitment job at UVM. I worked at UVM for 39 years. I was the director of student life in the Davis Center and retired a couple of years ago. And I kept telling myself I need to find time to do some things and pay back to the community that I live in, and never could do it when I was working. Yeah, you know, it's a 60, 70 hour a week kind of job. And now that I'm retired, I'm looking to do some of those community-wide activities and engagements. And in my part of my job at UVM, tied into judicial affairs. So I did some work around sexual assault sanctioning panels, did some work around judicial affairs with fraternities and sororities and with individual students. So part of my portfolio, so to speak, from my experience at UVM ties in fairly nicely with the current focus of the Community Justice Center. Probably, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, the university started looking at restorative practice, which is another version of restorative justice, as part of the way they were doing their work around sanctioning individuals who did things that didn't fit into the community. So I'm here to offer my services to give back to the community and bring my skill set to that as well.
Thank you. Greg?
Good evening, friends. My name is Greg Campbell. I live in Williston. We've lived in Williston since 2009, but I am a native Vermonter, having been born and raised in Duxbury. Was a sort of a 3-season athlete, went away to college, vowed never to return, got my bachelor's degree with hopes of going into federal law enforcement, but unfortunately there was a hiring freeze, so I returned and have been in law enforcement for the last 24 years or so. I am currently lieutenant with the Vermont State Police. I am the commander of our Technology Investigation Unit, which is a pretty fancy term. So there's 4 distinct units that I oversee. I oversee our computer crimes and mobile digital forensic unit. I oversee our polygraph unit. I oversee the detective that is assigned to the FBI's cyber task force, and I oversee the executive protection unit, whose sole responsibility is for the physical protection and transportation of the governor of Vermont, whoever that happens to be. Why am I interested in this position? So my mentor is actually Donna Stafford's husband, Bob, who is actively involved in the CJC. Upon graduating from college, the state police also had a hiring freeze on, and Bob at the time was the chief of the Milton Police Department. So he brought me on board, and he continues to be my mentor. And he actually approached me and asked if I would be interested in the position. Always been certainly within my adult life, been active with volunteer efforts, whether it be Special Olympics Vermont. I worked my way through the ranks of what was called Cuff Cancer, which was Cops United for Fighting Cancer. It was a nonprofit. Started out as the treasurer and vice president and then president. I'm actively involved with Scouts for Our Son, coaching basketball. So, in short, my entire adult life has been in law enforcement, where my sort of priority has been to, identify those individuals responsible for crime, and then sending the relevant paperwork for the state's attorney and members of my peer group to make a determination about innocence or guilt. So having been asked by Bob to be involved, I've always been very interested in criminal justice and accountability, but now seeing the other side of the process. For transparency's sake, I haven't been involved with arresting individuals for over 7 years, and I certainly don't want to say the existing system is broken, but I think that there are better ways to hold people accountable to themselves and to the community. In addition to that, again, just my volunteer efforts and wanting to give back to the community, which we love and are very proud to be a part of.
Thank you very much. So, board members, questions for our panelists?
Well, Terry, I'll ask my my standard question, but before I do that, thank you, everyone. Greg, when I was do you mind if I ask you a question and probably not ask the others, because I think this is specific to you? And I was very intrigued by your for lack of better words, the application, the information we had in front of us. And I wanted to hear from you about what would cause somebody in law enforcement to want to be part of this, this effort, this way of looking at justice. And you started to, but you gave just a very brief sort of answer there. And if you feel comfortable, I doubt it will affect my decision, but if you feel comfortable, could you just explain more, you as a police officer, why you want to be part of this group? Does that make sense, first of all?
Sure, absolutely. So as I alluded to, in my initial presentation, again, I haven't been active with, identifying individuals for quite some time, but I'm still affiliated with the Williston Barracks, and it was, I just found it very interesting how the current state's attorney has basically, directed the majority of the cases that come into her shop to the CJC. And again, I don't have any insight as far as whether that's a result of COVID or lack of staffing or a change in priority. But again, as a police officer, we see a lot of recidivism. And again, I'm not educated currently enough to say whether the system is currently broken, but I think there's issues, and I think there are better ways of potentially handling calls. And I am a strong advocate of restorative justice. Of course, as a law enforcement officer, I feel it's important to hold people accountable to the impacted parties. But again, the way the system is set up, individuals are committing crimes and aren't really being held accountable because of the existing court system and how the courts are overloaded. So I'm very much intrigued and very interested in being involved in the process of having those folks. And again, I'm very much leaning toward law enforcement verbiage, and I know that's not how the CJC works, but very interested in helping them make a contribution and recognizing the damage that they did to those impacted parties and to the community. And in law enforcement, we don't have that involvement. We basically present the case to the state's attorney. They ultimately decide whether they're going to prosecute the case, and then it's obviously the judge and the jury to decide whether folks need to be held accountable and how they are. In this role, again, it seems like we have a lot of influence into how that process works and making it be more impactful for, both, again, the impacted party and those that, cause the harm.
Great. Thank you. I guess it's appropriate for me to say I've been a fan of the, of this board. And what you just explained made me a little bit more of a fan. And just Donna or Pat, do you have anything to add? I mean, or, now that you've heard that, anything else you maybe want me or the other select board members to know?
I would just say that I concur with what Greg said. I think that it's a system and there's issues with the system. And if there's a better way to hold people accountable for certain transactions they did in the community that impacted the community, this is appears to be a way that is more humane, engages more people. As an individual, I've had in my life things sort of disappear, stolen, and you give a report. And as someone who's been impacted, that's it. And so for me, I think the humanity of the conversation, which is part of the process, is one of the things that intrigues me as a way to build a stronger community.
Donna? You're muted, Donna. Sorry. Yes.
You don't need to apologize. I do. Thank you.
It's such a digital thing that happens. I mean, it probably happens to me.
And I'm somebody who never has a problem talking. So of course I just roll right into the conversation. I would just like to add one thing. I have to tell you that I've been through 3 weeks of trainings now with Brenna and with Crystal Lee, both of whom I had never met before. But as a lifelong educator, the work that they're doing and the process and the compassion and the empathy, but the responsibility and the accountability are work that I've done my entire life as an educator. And I felt so alone sometimes doing it because I stood in front of judges who wanted nothing more than to lock kids up. And whenever I went to their defense, it was always, Mrs. Stafford, you have the strangest relationships with the worst kids. That was our system. We have an opportunity to make change, to make a difference, and to help right some of those wrongs. And I have been so impressed with the people that have participated in the training, Pat and Greg, for example, and a host of other people. But Brenna and Crystal Lee, the integrity that they bring to the process, I want to support them. And I've not wanted to volunteer for anything in my life the way I want to support this work.
Okay. Good, thank you. All right, now I'm going to ask my standard question. For some reason, this has fallen on me to ask. I'll ask you, all three of you. It's a conflict of interest question. And, the question is how would you recognize a conflict of interest and what would you do about it? And maybe we'll start on the right this time and move to the left, which means, Greg, you get to go first.
Well, my ability to volunteer for this position required me to seek chain of command approval. So it went all the way up to our director, the colonel of the state police, and
very interesting.
Anytime a case would involve a member of the Vermont State Police, regardless of the barracks, I would have to recuse myself and certainly recognize that, sort of standard across the board. But other than that, unless it impacted me via a friend or a family member, I wouldn't necessarily see, just based on my position, there being a conflict of interest.
Good, thank you. Pat?
Well, I'm retired. I don't quite have the same hierarchy that Greg has in his work. But I guess it would be the last part of what he said would be that if there's people who I know who are engaged and involved, that would be part of the process as either an impacted party or the person responsible, I'd probably have a conversation with Crystal Lee or Brennan and say, so I happen to know this person. I think I can be pretty fair. It's sort of that question they always ask the people in juries. Can you be fair and impartial? And I think I'm a pretty fair and impartial guy, but I would pose the question to them and have a conversation about whether or not I need to step out and recuse myself because of a conflict.
Thank you. Donna.
Ditto. But I could have a conflict of interest for the reason that Greg mentioned early on. Or I could, in some people's eyes. Bob Stafford is my husband. He is a volunteer. He's on the board of directors. He actually, I don't know, does some sort of leadership role with that. And prior to my volunteering, I'd been thinking about it for months, and I sat down with him and I said, but I wouldn't want to work with you. I'm married to you. I know you too well. And he sort of thought I was joking, but I wasn't, seriously. I would not want anyone that was sitting before us or sitting beside me to feel that they were disadvantaged in any way, or that the two of us had some sort of agenda in our community. So I said to him quite clearly, if I do this, I can never sit on a panel with you, because I don't want to be seen as your wife. I want to be seen as a volunteer.
Thank you, everyone.
Any further questions that the board has?
Just a quick comment.
Joy?
Just a quick comment. I love what you all are bringing in terms of skill set and just different things. I identify with each of you in a different way. So thank you so much for volunteering.
Thank you.
So I'd be looking for a motion then.
I'd move to appoint Patrick Brown, Greg Campbell, and Donna Stafford to the Community Justice Center Board to an unexpired 3-year term through June 30th, 2022.
Give a second.
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's unanimous, and congratulations to all three of you, and
Thank you.
Congratulations to Williston for having great candidates such as you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks.
So we're moving on then to
Be right back.
to the Lake Iroquois Association annual report. And Eric, if Chris Conant is ready to be on the line, we're ready for him.
Chris, get you connected right now.
That's the name.
Hey, Chris, you're getting connected. You'll just need to unmute and share your video once you're up and running here.
You can hear me now.
We can. So welcome, Chris. I can see you now too, so that's great.
How you doing?
Good.
Hello.
So welcome for your
How you
yearly.
I got a little confused with. I got a little confused with the way that this is different from other meetings, and so I was sitting there wondering, am I doing this wrong? Or so good. Thank you for having us. I'm just going to do a quick presentation. Eric, you had originally said to me about sharing that PowerPoint. Is it something that you have or not? Because if you don't, I can.
If I can pull it up on my end too, Chris, if that's easier for you. If you want
it probably is easier for me if it's okay.
Yep. Just give me a moment here. I'll get it.
Okay. Okay. I'll give. Yep. And I'll give you guys an overview. Thank you again for having us and inviting us to yet another year. And I don't know how we've gone through all these years. This is my 4th year as president of the association, and we are very fortunate to have an amazing group of colleagues some are with us here tonight, and that are on our board. There's 12 of us on the board of directors, and we've had an amazing busy year on Lake Iroquois, and probably one of the busiest years that we've ever had. And with everything going on with COVID and with all the changes in this world today, we are thankful for the fact that we can have a place of respite to be able to recreate and enjoy the outdoors and be able to be safe and secure, and at the same time enjoy the beauty of what I call, after 61 years of living on the lake, probably one of Vermont's finest natural resources, Lake Iroquois. And I really feel like we've had probably one of the busiest years that I remember, with people sharing the use of the lake. And I feel that because of the fact that so many people did spend time on the lake, either in kayaks or canoes or motorboats, sailboats, swimming at the beach. And really, I was out there last Saturday, and geez, there was 12 cars at the beach. There were people walking up and down BB Lane and up in the trails. And I really have to say that I realized how important Lake Iroquois Recreation District and Lake Iroquois is to our communities. And I think I know each of you, and I know how much Williston means to each of us, but Lake Iroquois really has become a destination to recreate and enjoy more so than ever. And I think it's going to be that way from now on. I think we're going to see an amazing upswing in the use. And it's important to us as an organization that we become or continue to be the stewards of the lake and make sure that the lake is healthy and make sure that we take care of the lake the way that it needs to be taken care of. So without further ado, I'll just do a quick, I know we have a limited time frame here, and I want to keep on that. I brought a PowerPoint that I'm going to have Eric just drop to the second slide. I don't know if I'm doing it, Eric, or you, but
Nope. I'll drive, Chris. Just tell me when to.
Okay, great. Yeah. So one of the things that we've seen is that we've seen an incredibly significant decrease in our phosphorus levels around the lake and in the lake with all of our projects. And the phosphorus levels have dropped significantly enough that it's affected our state scorecard, which basically is used to identify how our projects are doing that we've been working on, that we obtain grant monies for from the state and various organizations. And they basically track the successes of those programs. And I have to say that, Eric, if you go to the third one, that our this SESHI mapping basically identifies the clarity of the water on Lake Iroquois. And we have seen an amazing change in the clarity of the water because of the nutrient change in the lake. And Lake Iroquois has moved from a eutrophic body of water, which is basically the level of nutrients in the water, to now we're a mesotrophic lake, which we've lowered the nutrient runoff enough into the lake that we've changed the water quality. And these SESHI basically tests are a way that you drop an 8-inch disc into the lake on a foot-long cord, and depending on the clarity of the water, it measures those levels. So we really have seen significant changes in Lake Iroquois, and I know it's because of our community, the lakeshore owners and lakeshore users, and also the people that are visiting the lake, whether it's be with watercraft or just usages on the lake. So we really feel good about that. Next slide, Eric. One of the things that we have been identified through our programs is that making sure that the money and grant programs that we obtain and the projects that we put basically in the ground to help deal with our nutrient runoffs are working. And we feel that the state has recognized one of our projects on South West Shore Road, where we did a restabilization back in 2018, and how the functionality of that project exceeded expectations. And so that's what we look for. But it also gives us a opportunity to, when we obtain grants, that also gives us an edge over, say, somebody else or some other organization, if we prove that we are using the funds in the right way and that it's effective. So we feel really good about that. We have just finished the 4th edition of a Lake Property Owner's Guide, which is being submitted to all of the lake owners around the lake in the 3 towns. And it will, every homeowner and camp owner will have a physical copy available to them by next spring that they can share with their guests and maybe possible renters, and basically give them guidelines on how we feel as an organization we can promote good water quality and what it means to us as an organization, but also as landowners and users. So we really feel great about that. We have just finished a lake-wide management plan for the lake. It's kind of a 5-year window that we look at, and that is something we feel real proud about. And we know how important that management plan is to the successes of our programs, because quite honestly, the state requires us to do a 5-year management plan. And so we've just finished that. If you can go down, Eric, to the next slide. You've heard me talk about the greeter and boat wash program. We've been doing this for 10 years. It's a program that is recognized by the state as being a model for the state. We have really done a great job, and we're very proud of it. And I'll be honest with you, if without Williston's help and the town's help, I don't know if we could do it the way that we do it. And you all know that Shirley helps us in the financial office. She works very closely with us, and we really appreciate her involvement. But this year, we had inspected 1,600 water vessels, and that was only on Friday afternoons, Saturday and Sunday. So you can imagine, if you look at 2.5 days with 1,600 boats, and I'm talking about canoes, kayaks, motorboats, sailboats, anything that got put in the water. And we were looking at, with the boat wash station, at literally washing several hundred of those boats. But they've all been inspected to assure that not only do we not bring in any other invasives, we have 2 invasives as we speak that we're aware of, both the Eurasian water milfoil and the pondweed. Those are the only 2 that we have identified. There's over 50 invasive species in Lake Champlain. I think you've heard me talk about that. So this program is very successful. We had some amazing greeters this year, and many of you know Jim Johnson, who is was the coordinator for our boat wash station and greeter program, and he also is at Lake Iroquois Beach and has been for several years. We're very, very fortunate to have Jim on the lake, and we appreciate his hard work. We are working on the aquatic nuisance control grant from DEC, and I'll give you a little bit of feedback on the permit that we've put forth. Eric, could I have the next slide, please? We've been doing sampling on Lake Iroquois for over 40 years, and through our organization and also volunteers doing sampling. And this sampling data has literally been used to build our programs. And we really, really are lucky to have 4 decades worth of sampling. And unfortunately, this year, most of our sampling funding from the La Rosa grant was suspended because the funds were reallocated, used for COVID. And we're hoping to be able to resume sampling this next summer. We are working right now. We're working with the Lewis Creek Association on a collaborative effort, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. We had done a aquatic plant survey to identify the depth of the problem with the Eurasian milfoil back in 2019, and we plan on doing an additional survey this coming fall in September. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the loons at the end. Next slide, please. As we know, Eurasian milfoil remains a serious problem. We have reached into our tool belt, and we feel that we're in trouble. The diver-assisted suction harvesting was suspended this year because of COVID. The contractors were not able to work on the lake. That was a tough situation. We have scheduled them for 3 weeks in August this year. Hopefully with the changes in the vaccine, we should be able to see them, the contractor be able to work with us. We ran into similar problems where the Bensic mats that we use both at the access area and the beach, we had difficulties getting volunteers together to put those in. We did end up putting in channel markers at the boat launch, so we were able to do that, but we were not able to put the Bensic mats in. The herbicide for Eurasian milfoil mitigation permit, we have submitted the permit back in March, or at the beginning of March, for with DEC to apply Procelicor, and the Procelicor is a approved herbicide that is being currently used in 9 lakes in Vermont and has been approved by the EPA and by the state of Vermont Health Department. And we still feel that it is an opportunity that we look forward to if we do get the permit allowed. So we expected to hear by now if we were going to be approved or denied, and because of COVID, lack of staffing, and many other obstacles, such as a lot of work for the DEC to do to make the determination on the permit, they have not been able to finalize the decision. So we're looking forward to hopefully having a decision by the 1st of January, if I hope at the latest, but it is still pending. And next slide, Eric. We were very fortunate. I talked about this a year ago. Last year, we developed a new redesigned website, and I can thank all the members of our board, but specifically Pat Swazi, who is our past president and now the secretary of our board. She did an amazing job on our website design and worked with our designer to implement it. But we've all had input on this website, and we really feel that it's going to be a source of education for the users of the lake, and we're going to promote the opportunity of people, communicating with us through this media, and we really are proud of the work that we did on this new website. So if you haven't had a chance, it does identify all of our history that we've gone through as far as the work that we've done. It does have the permit that was submitted to DEC and all the details of that. And it will basically allow you to walk through Lake Iroquois in a visual way, and it's really good. So we have the owner's manual. We send out a newsletter, a quarterly newsletter to all of our members, and we feel good about the fact that we're working really hard with the members of the lake. We're looking at about 70 members. There's 92 lakeshore owners around the lake, and we've we've got about 70 people that are, or homes that are part of our membership. So we feel really good about that. Next one, Eric. For the first year ever, we're going to compete with Joe's Pond up in Danville, and we're going to have our first ice out contest. And Shannon Kelly, one of our board members, and Ernie Rossi have been instrumental in pulling this together, and we're looking forward to that. We're working with Lake Iroquois Recreation District, the Lewis Creek Association, and the Winooski Natural Conservation District on working on a new watershed plan for the watershed that feeds down through Chittenden County, and really look at the opportunity of working with this partnership. One of the things that we feel really good about is, as you know, your Lake Iroquois Recreation District members, board members, Sarah and Jeff Davis and Jack Lynn. Also, Jack and Jeff are on our board, and we have really worked very hard to develop a collaboration that we feel is going to move both associations or groups forward, and really looking forward to this. Started a few years ago when we were working together on the BB Lane remediation project. We have a complete redesign of BB Lane that's done, that we have put together with Lake Iroquois Recreation District. But now all we need to do is bring the funds available to make the project happen, and we're really looking at a couple $100,000 to do that. That's going to be a long-term project, but we feel it's something that needs to be done, and so we'll keep you posted as we're working through the funding pieces of that mechanism and funding mechanism of that project. And we feel that there is money available. We just need to figure out how we can make it work, both for our community on the lake and also the town of Williston. So stay tuned there. We're fortunate. We have Bruce Orr that's working with us also, and so hopefully we can come up with a good, solid program. Our Lakewise program is basically a education program for planting, basically a remediation of making sure that runoff doesn't seep into the lake, and so reducing lawns and leaving natural growth along the shorelines will help mitigate that. And so our Lakewise program, we have 5 members, owners that are in the Lakewise, recognized as a Lakewise program, and we're looking to develop that program through the next few years. Next, we had a very exciting 3rd year in a row where Eric Hansen from Vermont Eco Studies has worked with us in bringing loons to the lake. And for the last 2 years, we have had 2 chicks, 2 last year and 2 this year, that have been born on the lake. And we're really excited about it because, to be honest, to listen to those loons in the middle of the night or in the morning or late in the afternoon, they are amazing, and we're very, very excited about that. And we thank Eric for his hard work and many volunteers for their hard work to make that program happen. Next, I think that was it, right, Eric?
Yep, that's the last one right there.
So I want to look at our funding sheet. We have we've requested once again to, we've asked for $15,000 from the town of Williston and $15,000 from the town of Heinsberg. And Richmond, we requested $1,000 from, but they have, through their Conservation Commission, they have paid for our plant survey for the last few times. And so we really, that could be about a $4,200 window that they've given us. And so we feel that to be able to work with the programs that we want to see developed, and really, to be honest, we've got a lot of work to do. And I feel like we've come leaps and bounds. And I realize that this year is a difficult year for everybody as far as programs. And I ask that you take into consideration that recreation in Vermont is never going to diminish. And using natural resource areas like Lake Iroquois and Lake Iroquois Recreation District, we feel that we have a lot to do, and we're going to make that happen by working together. And working together means that whatever we can do to build a great community recreation area, which we have. And I feel like our programs, we're using funds from the municipalities to use as a matching funds for projects. And I have to say that, $3,000 that we use from the town of Williston for a portion of town of Williston then gets added to $30,000 that we may get from a grant. And so it's really important that we look at ways that we can build a funding base that to go along with our monies that our community surrounding the lake, and to be honest, community members that don't live on the lake that support our efforts. And so I really know how difficult your decisions are to balance it all out and to keep financially responsible and in check. But I really feel like we've come so far, and we've got a long ways to go. And I feel like Lake Iroquois is a precious resource that we need to make sure that we take care of. And if you could have seen the users on the lake this year, you would have been damn proud that we had as many people on the lake as we did. On the second week of September, on a Tuesday night, when there were 24 kayaks in the lake with teenagers in them, learning how to kayak safety and canoe safety, boys and girls, it made me feel wonderful that we have that opportunity to work with them. So the DEC permit, aquatic nuisance permit, we have no idea of where that's going to go. At this point, we're hoping for it to be a successful permit application like they have issued in other parts of the state. But for some reason, in Lake Iroquois' application, they're dragging their feet. And it's a little disheartening, but we're being patient, being respectful of the department being understaffed, and we're just sitting tight. So questions?
So thank you very much, Chris. And not just from you, but we've heard on the news lately the great number of resources that have been used in the state this year because of the COVID crisis and people getting out and exercising. So thank you. So questions, anybody, Jeff, perhaps?
Just a quick one. Hey, Chris. Thank you.
Jeff.
That was actually a very thorough review. The only question I have has to do with the the Iroquois Creek Association. I just don't know who they are and what it is that they're going to bring.
Yeah, Lewis, you're talking about Lewis Creek, not Iroquois Creek.
Yeah, Lewis Creek, right.
They're an organization, a well-respected organization that works out of an office in Heinsberg, and we've been collaborating with them and their members, and they have a great organization. Kate Kelly is one of the members, and Marty Illick. And they're a wonderful organization located in Heinsberg.
Okay.
And we're working on collaboratively with them to develop this watershed program together. And we feel through the Natural Resources, Winooski Natural Resources District has had funds that have become available that we can work. And basically what they're doing is they're developing a watershed oversight throughout the entire Lake Champlain Basin project. So, and we're in the initial stages of a grant to be able to work together on this watershed program.
Okay. And then I think you've addressed it as far as you can. I'm just a little, I guess, confused as you are about DEC not making a decision about the herbicide application and any indications they've given you on how they're leaning, but it sounds like no.
They had over 200 correspondence that they had to respond to, and part of this process, and we all appreciate this process, is that they have to look at it collaboratively to hear the pros and the cons of the public, the general public, and then they make a determination. It was a fairly balanced group of concerns, both for and against, but we feel that the science that goes into the use of any chemical, and I don't care whether it's any product that's on the shelf or a product that we use in the lake, the scientific evidence that is determined to bring that product forward is what really needs to be looked at. And if it's safe, if it's scientifically safe and used in an appropriate manner by professionals, then and approved by the health department, the state health department, we feel that we as a group should be able to take and use that product if they've allowed the use in other lakes in Vermont. And we're talking about using it in 4 lakes 2 years ago, 3 lakes this year with highly successful, very, very successful use. And we feel that we understand the responsibility, but based on the fact that the PDUs, which is the unit measure, is so low compared to other parts of the country. Our PDUs are up to 4 units, and it's allowed in various parts of the country to use up to 25 units. And so it's measured in such a small amount, the amount of chemical, but we're sitting tight. We're just hopefully feeling we've reached we really have reached the bottom of the barrel when it comes to our tools. But you heard me say we have scheduled the diver assisted suction harvesting once again, even though Bob Patterson that owns AB Aquatics has said to us, you know, Chris, I don't think this is effective, but if it's our only tool, then that's what we've got to do. But that's $7,000 a week for that one application. And so we're doing 3 weeks worth, it'll be, you know, almost $20,000. And so we need to make arrangements to have other tools to use. We just can't ignore this problem. The problem's going to stay with us as long as we ignore it. So we aren't going to ignore it. We are stewards of that lake, and we're going to keep pushing forward.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chris. And we've always got a good update from you on this. And
Thank
we'll
you.
certainly will give your request for funding due consideration. We'll be starting in earnest next week on the budget.
Yeah.
So indeed.
We always appreciate working with Williston.
Thank you.
You all are amazing. Thank you.
Well, thanks. So we'll move on. Thanks again, Chris, and we'll move on to the next
Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Take care.
Next is the town meeting 2021 preliminary discussion with Sarah Mason. And Sarah will be joining us momentarily, I think.
Yep, Sarah, I'm going to connect you right now. I see her on the line here. Want to reconnect, Sarah, just have to enable your audio and video in the left-hand corner.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. Are you doing the video or am I doing the video? Start video.
You've got to share your video. Yep.
There we go. There we go.
Gotcha. Yes, indeed. Okay. Welcome, Sarah. And we did have a copy of your email that we all have. So I think that's what you're going to go over tonight.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start with the fact that this is just kind of a preliminary discussion, and I think that I'll probably generate more questions than I have answers right now, partly because I thought I was going to be able to meet with the other clerks from the Champlain Valley School District and have a little more input about how this is going to look for all the towns. So still quite a few unknowns out there, some of which are logistical, I guess maybe philosophical also, and safety for March, depending on where we're at. So like I said, there's just a lot of balls in the air, a lot of which have to do with you folks. If you read the FAQs from the VLCT, basically everything goes back and says, whatever your select board decides, whatever your select board decides. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had just was thinking about how things will be different than they normally are, which of course we know Monday night is already going to look very different, you know, Zoom informational meeting or however that might go. And then Tuesday, whether we mail ballots to all voters like people received in August and in November, or if we have people request ballots for whomever is actually interested in voting. You know, we all know that town meeting turnout is not usually very robust. I was flipping through the last couple of town reports, and the average is about 1,500, 16. Last year in March, we had 1,600, and that was with the presidential primary going at the same time, which I think brought that number up maybe just a little bit. So just some things that we're going to have to weigh if we do think the right thing to do is to mail ballots to everybody, which we can't even do until Montpelier says we can. At this point, that applied to 2020. We need to wait and see if we'll be allowed to do that in 2021. So again, I think I'm just getting a little ahead of myself because this does take a lot of planning, and it feels like, you know, January has a lot of deadlines that we just need to be ready for. So I'm trying to think where I was going with that. My meeting with the other school districts is going to be on Monday. Hopefully they'll have some input, because if we decide to go one route, the other towns decide to go another, I think the school is going to be sort of caught in the middle of if Shelburne decides to mail ballots to all their voters and everyone in Shelburne gets a school ballot and Williston decides that we have to have people request a ballot, then the turnout for CVU would be very different in each town. So that's just things that are sort of noodling around in the back of my head about how this is going to go. So I think each select board, the school board, Elaine and her team are all going to have to sort of chime in on how this is going to, how we might affect each other this year more than we sometimes do. Postage will be a big question. If we decide to go that route, that's going to cost us a lot of money to do postage paid for people if we mail ballots to everybody. The checklist right now is down to about 7,600. That's after being able to challenge a lot of people after November. Everything that came back undeliverable. Jen and I have gone through the checklist and really gone over those to make sure people truly, most likely, are not at those addresses. And so that, was another 200 challenged voters, which would not be mailed a ballot. So 7,500 postage would be about $5,000 going one direction. If it's a 65 cent, that's 2 ballots, 2 envelopes. One direction would be about 5,000. So those are just some questions that I've been mulling over. And as most people know, the candidates that will be running don't have to do signatures for safety reasons. Articles to get on the petition, that one is still up in the air. I think that one, again, is the one that defaults to what does the select board think? But we can cross that bridge when we get there. But that's sort of what I was thinking. Does anybody have any questions, or anyone else has been thinking about how this might look? Any questions for me?
So in order to get a petition on a ballot, right now it takes 5%. What's the drop dead date for that to get a petition on the ballot?
January 14th.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that's one of the earlier ones. Like I told you today, Terry, and just in general, consent for candidates is later in January. That's the 25th at 5 p.m. So really the article one comes a lot sooner, full 2 weeks almost, and then the 25th for any candidate that might be interested. So, and then all of this has to get turned around, ballots made and back and available by February 10th. So that's 20 days before town meeting. So just a little bit of a different logistical, things for me to have to juggle as opposed to before. It was, wait till you get your candidates, get the ballot down to LHS, order maybe 2,000 or 3,000, and then just mail them out ourselves. I just have to be able to make a plan of, is it going to be ordering 3,000 ballots or 7,500? Am I going to hire a professional mailer to do this, or is my office going to do it itself? So again, I'm spiraling all the way to March, and I know it's only December 1st. So just wanted to get the ball going, and you know how my brain just gets ahead of the game, but you got to plan for these things. In January and February, it's like one deadline after the other. So any questions that you guys want to talk about? And then we'll keep this short. I know you have way more to do tonight than to talk about the details of March 2nd.
I would just add, Sarah, and on the petition articles, one piece in the VLCT guidance too was this electronic signature question as well as another piece for the board to consider. I haven't heard a lot of answers yet on that one. SOS is staying very quiet on a lot of these technical issues. They haven't really weighed in how they feel about an electronic signature and if people can use that as their signing of the petition, or are they going to have to? Do we want people going door to door? Do we want people to just put a clipboard out somewhere? I don't know the right answer to that question.
Interesting. Yeah.
There are ways to get it done. I mean, if you really, really want something on there, you have to find 375, of your closest comrades and somehow get that done safely and into us by the 14th. So certainly, again, harder for the people this year to get those things done safely as well.
Other questions for Sarah? So we'll have our hands full to make some decisions.
Yep. And I'll have a lot more to report back. I think my meeting is Monday now. It's been postponed twice. So once I can hear from Elaine, the other clerks, other select boards. Heard a little bit out of Shelburne via their clerk, but it was nothing concrete. But everyone is having these discussions. So hopefully I can just chime back in via email or through Eric and let you know what I hear after Monday.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So,
Bye. Bye. See you tomorrow, Eric.
So moving on to sidewalk winter maintenance requests. Bruce Hoare is going to be joining us.
getting you connected, Bruce.
I see him.
Right. So
It's December. We must be back to sidewalk.
here we are again, right? Yeah. We have two requests this year. One is from an area that we've actually been requested for back in 2012. That's for the Bittersweet neighborhood. The other is for the golf links area. To do that, their sidewalks through their neighborhood. Ran them through the winter maintenance plan policy, and they both only meet 2 out of the 8 criteria. So our recommendation is to not add these sections to our sidewalk plowing. Bittersweets was put in by their association president, and the golf links was through the association secretary and 2 residents. It's the same as, most of the other ones we get, they don't really connect to anything that part of our policy wise. And once again, if we started doing these areas, there's a lot of other neighborhoods that would be wanting to be done too. So recommendation is to not add them at this time.
So the one for golf links, they were mentioning the snow that piles up at the end of the 2 roads where kids have to cross the street to catch the school bus apparently on the sidewalk on the other side of the road. Is there any solution for that?
Well, to plow it, but I mean, it's the same as, it's not the only place where there'd be places where we might be plowing through and then the other side of the road is not necessarily getting done. Certainly we could do those, right where the push buttons are for the crosswalks. That's not a big deal, but it's just adding more, Terry. That's all it comes down to. So the only solution is just either do those right where the crosswalk signals are and not through the neighborhood itself. That's something that could certainly be done.
Questions for Bruce?
No questions. But I like the idea of making sure those crosswalks are whatever the best word is, as clear as possible, because we do.
No, that's fine. We will.
Yeah.
Just remember, the school doesn't have a walk to school policy. The bus is available for every kid to go to school. So, I mean, that's one of the things where, we haven't done things because of that. There is no walking route to school, right. Even though people walk.
Yeah. In this case, I would point out it's so that kids can get to the bus stop. That to me, there's a safety aspect there that if we can deal with that, I support that. Yeah.
We can and will, Jeff, but
great.
That's the same argument we have in the other neighborhoods. It's kids walking down the sidewalks to get the bus stop.
There's no action needed if we agree with the recommendation of the Public Works Department.
Yeah. Agree, but primarily because it follows the policy.
Yes. So here, are there any other comments or questions? And hearing no action being taken, then we'll move on then to the fiscal 21 revenue forecast update.
Eric,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Terry. Eric, did you want me to mention something about us trying to work with getting those other drivers?
Sure. If Terry, if you'd like Bruce
Yeah.
for a quick update on that here.
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay, so we've reached out to a couple contractors who have agreed to help supply us with some drivers that we can train in our equipment. So for the two lawyers on the board, it's down to dealing with the legal agreement now that our lawyer actually came up with, but one of the companies is pushing back a little bit on, which is understandable. So anyway, we are moving forward with that, and hopefully we'll get something resolved so that we have some backup as we go into the winter here.
Good. Any questions for Bruce on that?
Hope the lawyers don't muck it up too much, Bruce.
Just doing their job.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. And we'll move on to the revenue forecast update with Eric.
I'm actually going to connect Shirley as well in case
Yes.
we have some things to add. So Shirley, I'm gonna get you connected here. She's upstairs. I'm downstairs. And Terry's upstairs.
Sounds like a British TV show. Upstairs, downstairs.
So good evening again, everyone. I wanted to provide an update from October. We're trying to try to do this every couple months with our revenue here in FY21, which continues to be a piece we need to examine on a lot of factors at play here. But I feel that we have some positive trends to present tonight, so I want to update those to the board and the community. You might recall back in October, our projection was about a $580,000 operating budget deficit this year. And staff worked on providing budget spending adjustments to arrive at about $86,000 that we felt would be an operating deficit at that point. So based on some data gathered, I'll go through here and additional budget information on the revenue side. I'd like to report tonight, we feel as though this operating deficit has been addressed for the time being. I guess I would say with the many moving variables, we would still not be out of the woods yet. We need to keep an eye on, especially with local option tax receipts. This quarter coming up is going to be a critical quarter for us. But I'll get into this a little bit more as I go ahead here. So I'm actually going to share my screen just so I can pull up the charts I put together with that memo. I can figure out how to do it. I'd like to go to plan B here. All right. Okay, I'm just going to walk through on my screen because it's not giving me the option I want right here. But so I'm just going to hit some points from the memo that you have in your board packet this evening. So first I looked at our property tax receipts, and we've now received 2 property tax payments for the fiscal year. You recall the board changed the first installment to September instead of August, and then we just collected our November 15th tax payment. So what I did here was I tried to look at the same point in time. The treasurer ran a report for me of November 20th in each fiscal year, so FY20 and FY21. You'll see in the table our billed property taxes and then our total installment payments. Basically took our total municipal bill and divided it by 3 to look at these installment payments. And I think a good measure to look at here is the percentage delinquent, because each fiscal year we had a different billed number for property taxes. So if you just compare it on a dollars for dollars amount, it's different because the 2 years were different for the dollars billed. So I'm kind of keying in on the percentages here. And so if you look at FY20, as of November 20th, the percentage of delinquent taxes from that first payment, which would have been August of 2020, was about 6% delinquent. When you look at FY21, that number from the first tax payment as of delinquent number as of November 20th, and this is referring to September 15th of this year. That was down at 3%, comparing the 2 years. Same thing, we look to our second payment of delinquency, and granted, this is November 20th, 5 days after it was due. Back in FY20 last year was 23%, and this year is 21%. So then, point in time, November 20th of the 2 years, after 2 of 3 tax payments, the delinquency rate in FY20 was 14% and FY21 was 12%. And I imagine since we've run this, tax payments have continued to come in the last couple of weeks, and I'd be interested in running this again in January to see where it is. But kind of our overall takeaway here has showed us that our tax receipts are coming in on par or better as compared to last year for that revenue stream. So that was a positive outcome to report here. Any questions on that one before I jump in the local option tax? So next, our local option tax revenue, and I received, and you have a copy in your packet for the last quarter that was reported here. I realized I had a couple typos in my narrative versus the table. So the table's the one to go with here. Too many numbers these days. I crossed them up here. But if you look at the table, what I'm trying to do is think about this COVID environment we're in. So our option tax is collected from April to June of last year. I'm calling that our first COVID quarter. And then this quarter we just got the report on as our second COVID quarter. So we have 2 quarters of data to take a look at here. And on the rooms and meals side, you'll see we budget based on that rolling 3-year average. So that first COVID quarter, we had a deviation of about $55,000 from our budgeted amount for that quarter, about a 55% decrease. And we use that basis for our initial analysis in October, thinking, okay, what's the outlook for the fiscal year going to look like if this is our known experience for this revenue impact? So we looked at the same data for this last quarter, our second COVID quarter, and we saw that deviation of about $42,000, which was about a 38% decrease from budget. Not great, but an improvement percentage-wise from that first COVID quarter. I will preface with the rooms and meals piece, there's a lot of variables at play here, especially seasonally, that are hard to account for. But this just looks at a raw number standpoint from a quantitative perspective. So if we average out that percentage for those 2 COVID quarters, it's averaged at about a 46% decrease from budget. So keep that in mind, and then I'll look ahead for the sales tax piece of it, which is the majority of our local option tax receipts. Looking again, the same methodology for that first COVID quarter, we saw about a 7% decrease away from what our budgeted number was for that quarter, and this was last fiscal year as well for that benchmark. So we look at the quarter we just went through, and we saw 9% over the budget for that quarter. And I found it interesting. I looked back at our historical numbers since the town's collected a local option tax for the last 21 years. And that quarter was the second greatest ever receipts quarter for that quarter of the year. And if you look at every quarter since 1999, it was the 13th highest quarter of collected local option sales tax. So it shows that revenue stream has, it's been pretty solid over the last quarter of the year. I'm not at a point at this time, I want to say that's going to continue with that kind of robust overage. In budgeting, we always prepare that we take this rolling 3-year average. We have better quarters that falls to the fund balance that helps smooth things out over time. So I feel as though at this point, though, we can kind of look back at our budget numbers for the sales tax for FY21 and feel as though our budget numbers, we may fall more along par for that sales tax piece. So our percentage of variance for those 2 COVID quarters was about 1% over budget for sales tax. I'll pause there. Any questions on that piece of it?
Really, no.
Eric, any speculation why the July through September sales tax was the number that it is?
No hard data, Ted. I saw a report in the news saying across the state that sales tax receipts were up this year, especially. I've heard some anecdotal from businesses, some larger retailers in town saying they've had very good years with people at home and having different needs. But our report from the state tax department is very limited. We just get a dollar amount. We don't have a breakdown of retail on-site versus online sales, but I know the online sales have been very, very good, and predict that will continue these next couple of months.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say the conservative side of us still says they're probably better than expected with the sales tax because of all the government subsidies. And right now, we don't know what's happening with that. So who knows, what might come in the first half of next year. Although there was some good news today about funding for municipalities, possibly.
Really?
Yeah, what was that?
The Congress, they're looking at a budget for municipalities and airports, and
Okay.
I forgot the third part of that, but in discussion, so we'll keep our fingers crossed.
All right.
So I take these two revenue buckets, we'll call them our property tax, our local option sales tax, and you may recall another piece of this was our local fees and for service. For example, we're not doing, clerk's office isn't doing passport processing right now, and there's no revenue stream there. And also our investments in CDs and money market accounts, the interest proceedings has gone way down this year. And we expect that to continue into the next year. So those revenue streams are really decreased. But Shirley and I feel kind of taking a relook at the local option tax analysis. We have 2 quarters to go by, 2 quarters of data. Based on that analysis, we feel our projection for revenue is we're about $52,000 greater than October analysis after that 1 quarter. So with my comments at the beginning of this report, that's still a volatile area for us. As of this point in time, with what we know and what we're projecting, we feel as though that's an outcome that we may see. But I really feel like this current quarter we're in right now, which is typically our largest sales tax receipts quarter with the holiday shopping season, when we get this report, I believe in February or so, that's really going to tell the story for FY21 and where we're going to end up revenue-wise there. So I'm cautiously optimistic there, but I would advise that we should wait a little bit longer to be sure. And then we also received some good news. The state provided additional local highway dollars to municipalities based on a formula for our highway classification, and we received, I believe it was about $41,000 additionally, and we could look for just general fund revenue on that point. And then another accounting-wise, we had allocated about $50,000 towards the code-based, form-based code study, and those expenses are going to hit over 2 fiscal years. So you'll see in the budget proposal, I think we've kind of split it between the 2 years, so we wouldn't expect to spend about $30,000 that we had budgeted in 21. We won't be paying that to the consultant then, so we can decrease that expense in 21. So you add these together, and there's some other items that Shirley is still looking at and analyzing, and that makes up that $86,000 operating deficit we saw at that point. I know we'll have some more data and information on this to bring back to the board at the beginning of next year. Or any additional questions, happy to answer them tonight.
That was very, very good.
If there's no more questions on that presentation, then we can go on to the fiscal year 22 budget transmission to us.
Sure. And feel free to jump in with questions. I'm talking a lot about finances here too, so certainly feel free to jump in as well. But it's it's my pleasure this evening to transmit to the Select Board the FY22 operating budget, FY22 to 27 capital budget and program proposals. My first as Williston Town Manager to the board. I want to have a few comments, and I'll go through some general highlights of these budget documents this evening. The staff formation process this year was a bit different than a recent memory. I went through some of the revenue sticking points we've looked at in this fiscal year. So trying to predict where that is next fiscal year is additionally challenging at this stage in the game. Department heads did a great job looking at finding savings to control expenses on that side of the balance sheet and really working to maintain a similar level of service currently offered. As the board knows, there's always going to be cost increases, primarily look at salary increases, benefit cost increases, and then materials and commodities increases. Cost of doing business does go up each year for those pieces. So our approach here was to try to look at these variables, especially on the revenue side, and work to take a conservative and pragmatic approach, considering the revenue for FY22 in this initial budget proposal for the select board. We don't know what a post-COVID environment is going to be like and when that's going to occur. And I like to think of the budget as the spending plan built on the knowledge at the time. And this, as opposed to other years, there are a number of unknowns at this time to still contend with and try to think about. And staff's work to build in the best assumptions that we can in this transmittal. And as the board works through this policy document the next month and a half, we're going to learn more information and things can change. And staff will stand ready to support different evaluations and projections as we go here. So I'll get into kind of the highlights I'd like to hit this evening. One thing is interesting in looking at this each year, and it's table 1 in your binder on the operating side, is the population growth of Williston. And I know we'd always looked the last 20 years, Williston's averaged really consistent bell curve of about 100 new people each year. And I'm looking at the last couple of years, especially, Department of Health projections has Williston just over 10,000 residents now. It's the number 10 in terms of population in the state of Vermont. And once we get the census numbers, once those wrap up this year, that will really give a solid number of where we are. The last couple of years, we've added over 200 residents each of those years, about a 2% increase each. And as we think of a growing community, thinking about the needs of that community and delivering services to that community with more residents and what that looks like from an operational standpoint. So this budget is a proposed 0.7% decrease from the FY21 operating budget. It's about an $82,000 reduction compared to last year. This budget doesn't add new positions for the town, but there are some reconfigurations of hours and delayed hirings as part of the equation. One item I will note, in prior years, we budgeted salary in the police department, assuming there'd be vacant positions for a period of time based on the experience the last couple of years. This budget accounts for full staffing, which we're planning and hoping to achieve soon. We've made some adjustments this year in our projections to account for that. I need to check with Chief Foley kind of where that stands, but that's our plan moving forward here. So you'll notice increases in the police budget in comparison. That's part of the accounting around it. And this initial proposal shows a property tax rate with a 0.5 cent increase. And you might ask, why an increase with a lower expense side of the budget? And of the many assumptions in this budget, as we discussed with the town assessor, this assumes a flat grand list this year, which the town hasn't experienced in a number of years, taking a conservative approach here to project that flat grand list. The growth of the grand list in past years produced added tax revenue that would be achieved without necessarily changing the tax rate year to year. As you go through your budget materials and look at the revenue reports, you'll see the revenue streams have changed in this proposal based on a number of the factors I described in the last agenda item. This property tax increase in this scenario offsets projected decreases in other sections, including local option tax and investment income, which are tied to the current economic situation. When Shirley and I looked at trying to forecast the local option tax revenue in this budget, we took the same methodology of the 3-year rolling average, but there's one piece I changed on the rooms and meals side. I took out that COVID quarter, this first COVID quarter I was calling earlier in the year. I removed that average and replaced it with 4 years ago to create a 3-year rolling average with those numbers with COVID removed. And then from each quarter, I calculated what I was calling a COVID reduction from the 3-year rolling average. So quarter one of FY22, I was assuming a COVID reduction of 40%. This is kind of based on those averages from those first 2 quarters. Then I graduated that down to a COVID adjustment of 30% the following quarter, 20%, 10%. That's a best guess at this point, trying to be realistic and conservative. That we're hopeful that environment changes, but from a budget standpoint, that was our initial approach here in arriving at that number. So another piece I want to highlight is Shirley and our auditing team are working on the FY20 financial statements and the audit right now. When this is complete, it's going to provide a clear picture of our unassigned fund balance. And this draft budget uses fund balance conservatively. We've decreased it. It's used from FY21 for capital projects by about $215,000 and increased its use for tax reduction by about $60,000. And there certainly exists the possibility to budget to use more of the fund balance in FY22 for tax reduction. And when those financial statements provide that guidance, that will assist the board in deciding what direction to go there. But we expect to have those in the coming weeks from the auditors, and that'll be a piece for the board to consider in the revenue equation here. I'll pause there before a few comments on the capital budget if there's any questions from the board.
So Eric, Jeff here. I'm looking at under the first page under revenue. I'm trying to understand that half-cent increase in the property tax when we're actually seeing a decrease in the budget. And that story is really told by the revenue picture.
Yeah.
Where unfortunately it looks like this year the non-property tax revenue is not going to be as large as it was in previous years. So even though we're seeing a small decrease in the budget, we're still needing to see an increase in property taxes because the other sources of revenue aren't projected to be as high this year. I want to make sure I got that correct.
Yep, that's exactly right, Jeff.
Yeah. Okay.
We're seeing those decreases, and that would be the offset tool to explore.
Yeah. It's a classic case of no good deed goes unpunished. Yeah. Reduce the budget, but you still got the property tax increase. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. And the fund balance thing, I always get a little screwed. I'm not a finance person. You probably already figured that out. I always get a little screwed up with the fund balance, but we'll work through that at other times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I've talked to Shirley about this. Kind of for the last number of fiscal years, the town's budgeted about $500,000 of fund balance for tax reduction, and Shirley can kind of speak to the cash flows. And we've accumulated more fund balance in those years, and we haven't necessarily needed to use the previous fund balance towards that purpose due to our excess. So we'll dig into that a little bit further as we have the revenue budget here.
Okay.
So on the capital side, this was an area where we spent a lot of time thinking about, and we see a majority of our operating budget decrease on the capital side, about $230,000 in general fund dollar allocations from last year. And what we wanted to be mindful of was deferring projects that we felt could wait or splitting projects. And we really did not want to put anything off that needed to be addressed sooner. You'll see there's a couple items, some new that we feel should have some attention in the coming fiscal year. A major component of that capital budget is the equipment fund, and it maintains a funding structure for scheduled asset replacements. And we'll go to some creative work that staff looked at for different funding structures that we'll share to try to find some savings and different ways to fund some of these projects. And I'll remind the board our debt service obligation is going to be increasing a bit. with some bond notes approved the last couple of town meetings with fire trucks in 2019. Those should be delivered, and our first bond payment will be due on those in FY22, along with the Muddy Brook culvert replacement, which we're seeing a schedule where we're hoping for this summer for that replacement, and then that bond payment to start in FY22, I believe in November. So that's going to add some on the debt service side of the capital, and this flows into operating. But we will see some of our bonds on our long-term debt coming to maturity in the next 3 to 4 fiscal years, which will provide some relief there and some reevaluation of debt load the town would look to take on at that point. And then kind of a final note, I'm going to I'll be tasking department heads with preparing for their presentations for the board the next 2 weeks coming up. One thought of mine is having department heads think about that 3 to 5 year window as well, with kind of that medium term growth and needs. And as I'm thinking through these kind of main points, in addition to the budget highlights and news from departments, if the board had anything they'd want me to advise department heads to address during the presentation, if you would please let me know this evening, and I can have them plan accordingly. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer questions with Shirley here.
And so we'll be delving into this starting next week in great detail. But if you have any burning questions tonight, this is the time. Hearing none, I guess we'll go on then to the manager's report.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, please.
So I was sitting in on the planning commission, and they actually had lots of feedback, and I feel like I'd rather write that up. But there are some simple things that are just, like adding some information to the capital budget spreadsheets, especially when it comes to, buying or looking at energy efficiency or electric options for vehicles and things. But they did have quite a list. And so I thought I'd rather just put a memo together and send it to you, and things that we may or may not consider. But anyways, they had some concerns and I wanted to share those. So via memo, is that the best way to do that?
I think so. Sure. Okay. Email. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's good.
Great.
So we will continue then with the manager's report.
My written report was not a whole lot on it this time. Some news: we made a new hire in the library. Kristen D'Agostino's joined us as the program services librarian. She began last week. And then one thing that's not in my written report, but I provided the board with some information earlier today. I want to update on the request for feedback on the Black Lives Matter request. I had a meeting with the community partners yesterday who've been engaged in discussion to form a coalition group with initial focus of ways to collaborate as organizations in fostering dialogue and education around the topics of racial equity and social justice in the community. The group discussed the request of the select board at its last meeting for feedback on the request for the installation of the Black Lives Matter message at the group and community levels. And the partners I spoke with asked me to share with the select board that the partners do not wish to provide feedback on the Black Lives Matter message topic or the other request items the select boards received as a component of that request. They asked that I share the following points regarding that the group is very much in the forming stage still, working to define what its work would encompass, people who are a part of it, and how it can function. It's been convening these organizations who are discussing the coalition concept and what shape it may take moving ahead. So being such as not fully formed, the individuals who've been engaged from the various organizations feel a formal coalition of the body cannot weigh in at this time on those items. The community partners involved plan to continue dialogue moving forward. We have another meeting on Friday and putting the organizational components of a coalition in place, and I can certainly keep the board updated on those dialogues and conversations. One point that was brought up yesterday as well was thinking about the benefits of a single sponsoring agency for a coalition to provide community with clarity around structure and communication, as well as a force of cohesion to keep the group together. and the sponsoring agency could work on kind of formation leadership for such a group. So based on the feedback from the community partners group, I've included in that communication today alternative means to consider for collecting public comment on the Black Lives Matter message installation if the board should wish to set up a system at this point. Really, we've received a number of comments I have directly as long in addition to board members that you've shared with me. But I've had a proposal which would involve using me as a main point of contact for the board. And in addition, the Community Justice Center with Crystal Lee. And with contacting the Community Justice Center, folks could speak with Crystal Lee confidentially over the phone to share additional comments. And what we would look to do is provide the select board with a report on that information. But looking for feedback from the board on direction we'd like to move forward with comments, and certainly it's just an update tonight. So if the board wants to provide with guidance at a further date, I can await that guidance.
Jeff has disappeared from my screen. I'm not sure if he's on.
Oh, I'll get him back. There we go. He must have dropped off there.
There he is. You're back.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's my crappy internet.
I'm not sure if you heard Eric's presentation.
I didn't, but Eric, how about this? I'll read it, and if I have any questions, comments, I'll give you a call or email tomorrow.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, apologize for that.
No, that's all right. But we do have it emailed to us today, and not sure if we want to go forward with the recommendation tonight or wait until next week. Any thoughts?
Recommendation to actually decide the issue?
Pardon?
You're saying that you're wondering if we should decide the issue tonight?
No, the recommendation of taking comments by Crystal Lee. No, the issue is we'll not be doing that until sometime in January.
I think it's probably a good idea. I'm a little concerned that it's going to engender, rather passionate feedback that I can already predict which each side is going to say. But I don't think if the people who are going to be receiving the communications are willing, then I think we should do it.
And several of us have been receiving emails.
Yeah, I'd like a chance to speak for a minute. I made a pretty innocent comment a couple of weeks ago about being afraid of opening Pandora's box. And the amount of email and commentary I've gotten that's been pretty nasty, actually, was really rather disturbing. And I felt like I was very much being bullied. And that's not something I say lightly, because I think y'all know me well enough to know that I pretty much hold my ground pretty firmly. But I didn't appreciate how it came across. And all of a sudden I was labeled a racist when that was never the comment that I was intending to make. Some of it was shared with Eric. Some of it was shared with Terry. Some of it I just kept really quiet about, but they both know that I'm getting pretty upset by it. And then I've been barraged with emails for the last 5 days from people that are calling themselves the silenced sector, that are afraid to speak out because they don't want retribution, business owners who don't want to say anything publicly because they're afraid they're going to have retribution. So I think it's something this board actually needs to hear and be cognizant of moving forward. And Ted, you're right. I think you're going to see a lot of comments on both sides. Again, I think that we need to look at it as a board of going, is this a decision that we're supposed to be making? Because I still feel like we're overstepping the bounds of what town governance is and what we're supposed to be doing. And now I'll get off my little soapbox.
Well, we'll get to that kind of discussion much later. I guess the question is, do we want to have a central location for emails to come in? In the last couple of days, I've received half dozen that are concerning.
Sounds like we should.
Any objections to going forward with that recommendation? I see nobody in opposition at this point, so we will go ahead and do that. Hopefully, Crystal Lee will agree, and we can go forward with it.
Yep. I've had a conversation with her yesterday in drafting this approach to the board's consideration. So certainly on board. And I guess I would ask the board. I can put this information out there on the town website, but what degree would you like me to kind of look at this call for information? This is kind of our standard on the website, maybe a social media post. I know it's received some coverage locally, but I just, what extent would you like me to be proactive in this?
The only comment I have, and now that I've had a chance to, sorry, I didn't have a chance to read Eric's email, is it has a date of January 31st. And I'm wondering if we want to shorten that time frame. I think there are a group of people who are hoping we would have made a decision already by now. And so I'm just going to throw that out there. Should we maybe tighten up the time frame by a month?
Well, I think
that's unreasonable with the holidays, Jeff.
Unreasonable?
Unreasonable. Yeah, I think you're just pushing too hard. And people are just starting to feel comfortable speaking out. And I think to ask that be done before the end of the year is a bit much.
you know,
2 weeks, February 15th, or the whatever work day is closest.
we had agreed sometime in January to revisit the issue if we can, and that would be somewhere in the middle to towards the end of January.
January 15th is a Friday. That seems like a troll mark.
I would be better with that than putting it to try to do it by the end of December.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I'd be happy to meet halfway. I think there is, just keep it at that. I'd be happy to meet halfway. My classic case of engaged my mouth before my brain.
Well, it sounds like January 15th is a good date at this point. That's one of those dates that the legislature always sets, the middle of January. So
yeah,
we can do that.
Okay, we'll carry on with that plan, and I will work to get everything organized for comments received and have a report for the board to review those comments in January.
Eric, did you want to talk a little bit about our Zoom meeting yesterday with Ginny and Jim and Aaron and Bill Hinman and myself?
Oh, sure. I was thinking about that earlier, Terry. So we convened a meeting of the legislative delegation with Town Assessor Bill Hinman to go over the concerns that he's brought up regarding the grand list and the impacts on COVID on both the residential and commercial valuation side. And our legislative delegation was very interested in the issue, and we'll be working to inform them with additional information and work to inform leadership in the legislature and other communities in the state as we examine these issues for legislative policy considerations in the upcoming session to look to stabilize that potential impact.
Okay.
And we also plan to reach out to the congressional delegation regarding that CARES Act funding for local governments as part of that dialogue. And Barry, I believe we had spoken about perhaps bringing the letter that we plan to submit back to the select board maybe as soon as next week or two for select board consideration to support as well in these efforts.
Yeah, we need to have as many people in the state aware of this to make sure that we can get some legislation done this year. Anything else, Eric?
Nope, that concludes my report for this evening.
Okay. Other business, the the charter changes that we had proposed to the legislature last year that never got any action on. It's in the process of being redrafted as in the bill form with Jim and Aaron as the co-sponsors of this. Right now, there's requests for about 300 bills being drafted at this point in time. So we would hope that within the next couple of weeks, we'll see the draft, which will essentially be last year's bill in a new form. And that'll be introduced into the House as soon as, well, probably hopefully the first week of the session. And perhaps we can get some action on that this year, even though we're going to be working, they're going to be working on Zoom for probably at least a month. And next week's meeting is at 6 o'clock, not 7, but 6 o'clock next week on Zoom. And we'll be doing essentially only budget business going through at least a half a dozen different departments on this, perhaps a little bit more than that, but we'll do our best to keep ourselves on schedule. Any other business that anybody has tonight? If not, then I'll call us adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone.